started putting tissues here too in case anyone cries.
Oh, I totally may cry, but whatever.
Yeah, you're welcome to cry.
Fun.
I had a real cry in an episode recently, a solo one. So like it happens.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was talking to someone recently who does retreats,
Mm-hmm.
and she asked if I go by Jess or Jessica, and she was like, oh, like commonly people shorten their names to like make themselves smaller. And I was like, now you have me rethinking my entire life.
Okay, whoa, I've never heard of that before.
I know, but I feel like Jess is like more casual and like it's like less professional. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like when I introduce myself as Jess, it's like, oh, like we're friends, not like, hello, my name is Jessica. You know what I mean?
Yes, very much so. I'm so used to getting like my last name. Now that I'm in like a civilian setting and hearing people say Madison, I'm like, huh? Like, what the heck? Like, please call me by my rank and my name. Like, it's so weird.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Big adjustment.
Well, Mads, welcome to Human to Human.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. And as you know, the way we kick off our episodes is with TMI talk, just to normalize. We're all messy humans. We're all imperfect. We all have weird shit happen to us. And so I would love if you're happy to share a story with us.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to talk about the other end, though. So back in 2019, I was sailing around the coast of Halifax with my ship for about a month, and we randomly came in on a Monday night. And so that meant Martini Mondays for pretty much the entire crew because we only had a couple of hours.
Okay.
And so sure enough, drank way too much, got back on the boat, was grossly hungover, and we sailed through the worst sea state I've ever sailed through. And we did it at 25 knots. So for everyone that's not Navy, that is incredibly fast. And so picture like going up and down, but like you're forcefully hitting these waves. And so there was puke on the bulkheads, like that's what we call the walls on board. There was puke on the deck, so the floors. Yeah. It was just everywhere. And I remember like sitting in my chair because I work in front of like 3 screens with like my legs up on it, like just rocking back and forth, like trying so hard to not like just be sick all over my console. But I am like so thankful now that I don't have to worry about drinking and being hungover and puking ever again, because that was the worst experience at sea I've ever had.
Wow. So. And I'm so excited to talk about living alcohol free and your experience with this, and also like what life is like not being hungover. Yeah. Because similarly to you, I've had a lot of puking experiences, and it's kind of what woke me up to being like, you need to figure out your relationship with alcohol, because when you're getting so physically sick, at least for me, I start to question, like, why am I doing this to myself? What is the logic behind this, you know? Yeah,
and my abuse of alcohol was normalized because of the environment that I was in. Okay. So because everybody else was violently hungover and puking everywhere, like, I didn't realize, like, oh, hold on a second, like, I need to question my relationship. It was just so normalized. Yeah. I didn't even realize I had an issue with it until I removed myself from that environment. And that's when all those light bulbs started to go off for me.
Okay, please tell me more about these light bulbs. Like, I want to hear about your journey to, you know, clearly you drank intensively in these environments that it was just common in. So how did that shift go for you?
So it wasn't until I moved away from Halifax that I truly realized, like, hold on a second, like, everyone that I'm surrounding myself with has a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Like, it was a part of our everyday life. Like, there was no just going over to a girlfriend's house without bringing a bottle of wine, or you weren't going out without drinking. Like, it was just so ingrained in our culture. And then when I came here, I moved to my cottage and I was isolated, and I still continued those drinking habits. And that's when I started to question, like, oh, it's actually not normal to drink by yourself, even if it is only like a glass of wine or 2 glasses of wine. And the more that I started to surround myself with people who also chose not to consume alcohol, that's when I started to realize, like, okay, like, this is more the lifestyle that I want to live. And so I was able to cut that substance out of my life, and pretty easily once I made that connection.
Wow. So who are these people that you were surrounding yourself by who actually didn't drink?
So my best friend now also doesn't consume alcohol, which I think is a huge player for me. Like, not having that pressure to drink is, I would say, like, if you can surround yourself with people who don't drink, that's like the best step in getting sober. Okay. But the book that I gave you earlier, that was recommended to me by someone who's on Instagram. Her name is Tay Anita. And that book like changed my life. It took me 2 days of reading, and I never wanted to touch the substance again.
Wow. And remind me what it's called again, just so people can also listen.
Yeah, it's called Quit Like a Woman. Okay. And it's more tailored towards women, but the message is still the same. Like, you will never want to touch the substance again once you read this book.
Wow. I'm excited. Yeah. I'm already on this like alcohol-free experimenting journey. And I've heard people, you're the second person who's recommended this. And it's interesting how something like a book or a podcast can put you over the edge and be like, oh, that's it.
Yeah. I think before, like, I was looking at alcohol and like, oh, my relationship may not be that healthy with it.
Right.
But now that I see alcohol as like a drug and something that you can be addicted to, and like it's the main ingredient in rocket fuel, for crying out loud, right? Like,
I didn't know that.
Once I realized that was what I was putting into my body, I was like, okay, like I need to take a step back. Like we do all this gluten-free and sugar-free stuff. Like the wellness industry is like $4 trillion. And yet here we are like consuming something that's literally a primary ingredient in rocket fuel. So once that clicked, oh my gosh, it was so easy.
How did you communicate it to people around you, your decision and that thought process that went into it? Or did you give explanation? I'm sure it depends on the person, but how did you navigate that?
I think in the beginning I relied heavily on the medication that I was on, because that was what kind of prompted me to stop drinking in the first place. Like when I was told by my medical team that, hey, you actually can't consume alcohol on this drug. So for the first couple months, that was what I relied on. And then as my journey continued, I started to feel more comfortable saying like, hey, I was actually like abusing the substance beforehand. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I didn't have a healthy relationship with it. And then once that conversation opened, it became so much easier. And just last week I went to a concert and one of my girlfriends ended up telling these 2 new people that we were meeting that I didn't drink beforehand. And so for me, like it was so nice for my reputation to kind of precede me that I don't drink. And now like my friends know that that's like a boundary that I have and it's respected. And it just gets so much easier when you start to communicate the reasoning behind why you're stopping to drink. Because so many people just assume that you're doing it because you're an alcoholic and you need to stop, when there are so many other reasons why alcohol doesn't necessarily need to be in your life anymore.
Yeah, and that's something that it's so weird how common it is to ask, well, why aren't you drinking? When that's such a personal choice and experience. And I find in the part of my journey where I'm at, I will not want people to know I'm not drinking. Maybe because I'm not ready for that conversation yet, or maybe because I don't want them to think of me differently. But I was like at a party recently with friends and was holding like a bubbly and drinking my bubblies, and I was like, I need to put this in a red cup. Like, I don't know why. I just feel so like, it's like, she's not drinking. Like there's this like big red sign in front of me saying I'm not drinking. And maybe that's just like something that evolves and changes when the people around you then know that this is actually a lifestyle choice. And what happens for you when there is someone who challenges it and says like, oh, but like just, you have to try a sip or just one shot?
Now I'm at a point where the more that I get challenged, the firmer I am in my stance. So I did get offered quite a few drinks when I was at that concert, but my response doesn't change. And this is my second time trying to stop drinking. I feel like I should be transparent with that. But the first time my messaging was all like, oh, I'm trying not to drink, or I'd like to stop drinking. Whereas now, like, I'm firm. Like, that is a hard boundary. It's not something that I'm willing to entertain. And there's no wavering there. So my friends know that they can't, I mean, they can try, but I'm not going to waver. So it's kind of like a waste of their energy.
Right.
So I think like having that messaging as like, I don't drink anymore is so key in like closing that peer pressure. So.
How do you feel? And do you question it for yourself, or how do you feel internally? Maybe when you tried the first time or now the second time, and it's been a year and a half, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
So how has that evolved for you from the beginning to now? Has it scared you to just think, oh, I can say concretely I'm never going to drink again, or I'm not drinking right now? Like, what's the mindset around it?
I would love to say that I would never drink again, but I don't know what the future holds. Like, I have romanticized the idea of like popping a bottle of bubbly, like on my wedding day, for instance. But then I start to question like, well, why can't I pop a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne or something like that, right?
100%.
Like, what is it about the alcohol that makes me want to consume it on a day that is so special?
Right.
But in our culture, like, alcohol is a core pillar. It's a part of everything that we do. Like, if you were to go on your social media and scroll, like probably 80% of the content that you have has some sort of like, either there's a drink place in the background, or you went to a concert and had a drink that you posted a story of. Like, it's just so ingrained in our culture. It's hard to kind of remove that pillar out of there without ever like thinking about it ever again. You know? So we'll see what the future holds. I'd love to say that I will never drink again, but I mean, we'll see. We'll see what
Did it scare you to say concretely, I'm not drinking? Like, how were you experiencing that statement?
Well, since it was the second time that I had tried to stop. And so there was definitely a lot of fear of like, well, maybe she'll relapse again. And even though I never identified as an alcoholic, when I did stop drinking, I think a lot of people pegged me as one, like, oh, she has an issue with alcohol. We have to be careful about how we handle it around her. Right. So when I got offered like to go into a liquor store or something like that, like people will look and think like, oh, like, is she okay to go into a liquor store? Right. I think that's kind of the hard part, is people don't understand that you can have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol and not be addicted to the substance.
Right. How do you see that difference?
I was able to stop when I wanted to stop. Okay. And I think that's kind of a slippery slope, though, because we've kind of created these two categories for alcoholism. So you're either an alcoholic and you can't tolerate alcohol, or you're like a normal drinker and you can still have dependency issues. You can still put it down whenever you want, but that's not to say that you have a healthy relationship with alcohol. And so that was definitely like the category that I fit into.
Yeah.
But again, like once I removed myself from that environment, like it just became so clear that like, hey, having a glass of wine in the bathtub every single night is not normal. Like that is not what self-care looks like. And now like my idea of self-care, I still take those baths every night, but they look very different than what they did when I was drinking and living in Halifax.
That's so interesting. I listened to a podcast that Mel Robin did, and she hosted a guest who came on to talk about understanding our relationship with alcohol and navigating it. And it's really shifted things for me because the guest, I wish I knew her name, but I can link it.
Yeah.
And the guest talked about when you crave alcohol or you have a desire for it, there's a desire under that actual desire. You know, like alcohol is used as such a crutch for us.
Yeah.
So like when I'm in a social setting and I'm having a craving to drink, instead of being like, okay, I'm going to go have a drink now, I actually now question myself, what are you actually desiring? Under that desire for alcohol, what are you desiring? And a lot of times it's feeling a part of the group, not feeling left out, feeling a part of the community. Or if I'm driving to my cottage and I get a craving to have a drink once I kind of hit cottage country, now I'm like, well, what's that desire under that surface level one? And it's like, oh, it's to relax. Oh, it's to let go. Oh, it's to not worry about work or the podcast or whatever. And so that for me has changed a lot, because I'm like, oh, we like use alcohol as just this like Band-Aid for a lot of things that we could help ourselves with if we dug deeper.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism for sure. And it's no surprise, like our lives are so busy. We jam pack our days. Like we're always on call with our phones and work. Yeah. And then you come home and you shut the door and you're like, okay, finally I can turn it all off. And the easiest way to do that is to reach for something to help with that.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, that was alcohol for me. But now like my coping mechanisms look a lot different. Like it looks like doing breath work. It looks like going to yoga. It looks like bettering myself through a variety of different ways, going to therapy. And that is way healthier for me than it is to like reach for a cider or a cooler or whatever it was that night, right?
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard because you have to confront the things that you just push down with the substance.
Yeah.
I find I'm crying so much more than I cry a lot in general, but I find these past couple months, but especially these past couple weeks, I've set the intention to try not to drink for a month, and I've never done that. And so I don't know. I feel like there's so much coming up that I'm allowing to come up now, and there's tools I'm using. And I just went to Othership in Toronto, a bathhouse and sauna place. I like cried for the whole fucking thing because it's just like there's so much I'm allowing to come out now, and I'm learning who I am without alcohol and how I'm fucking fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you think that you're not going to be the life of the party because you don't have a drink in your hand, but it's about who you are, not about the things you're consuming.
Well, there was a point in our lives where everything that we did was still fun without alcohol. And like for me, that age was probably around 16 when things started to change and I was introduced to alcohol.
Yeah.
But like going to the grocery store, for instance, used to be fun when I was little. And now I like, not anymore, but like when I was drinking, I'd be like, oh, like maybe we can bring like a drink and a little Yeti or something and go to the grocery store and make it fun. Like we used to use alcohol to like make things fun without remembering that like these activities used to be fun without alcohol present as well.
Yes.
So it's kind of like getting back to that little like inner child and just like embracing what is without needing it to be anymore.
Yeah. It's crazy. That's like one of the biggest things I flagged for myself when I stopped drinking at parties. One, how alert I am. It hits midnight and I'm like eyes wide open, like I'm tired, but I'm just like, you know, we get so slowed down and foggy when we're consuming things. And so I realize how alert I am. But my favorite thing is I feel like my grade 7 self, and that's a cringy time, but
love it.
Like I feel like how I used to feel like when I would hang out with friends when I was that young. And alcohol's been a part of my life since grade 8, which is just, when I think about how long that is, it's over 10 years. Is it over 10 years? No, almost.
Scary.
Like, how old was I in grade 10 or grade 8? But like I really, when I get to dance and just be so much more present in my body, it's amazing. And that's what's healing too and enjoyable about life. I find I can wake up the next morning and be like, oh, I actually really did have a good time.
Yeah.
Because you remember everything and you were so present.
Yeah. So when I used to drink, I would be like the life of the party. Like if I go dancing now, you're not going to see me like on the dance floor. That's just like not who I am. Mm-hmm. But when I was consuming alcohol, like I was out there all night long. Like you would have had to pull me off the dance floor. And then no wonder like I was suffering, like I would have crippling anxiety the next day because I wasn't being my authentic self. And now like I was just in Montreal a weekend ago and it was such a different experience. Like I had no anxiety. I felt like a total peace with who I am. And like, yes, everyone around me is like consuming their substances, but I find like that honestly helps like drive me more into sobriety because I see people like consuming and battling the hangovers and just throwing away cash because drinking is expensive too.
It's insane.
So expensive.
It's insane. I've never served alcohol before as like a bartender or anything until this summer, and I kind of do both. I work at the front desk at a spa, but then I also, it's a spa that serves alcohol, which is very niche, and I also work at the bar, and I didn't think I would want to be in a serving role because I was like, I'm trying to move away from alcohol. But similar to you, I'm like, oh, seeing how much money people spend and how much they consume, and it's wild. And seeing people's eyes gloss over at one point, you're like, wow, I feel alert.
Yeah. And I know we talked about like dating a little bit in our pre-podcast interview, but like when I go on dates with people that drink, like I've had drinks spilt on me on first dates. And that is just such like an ick for me now. Like, and it's not to say that I want someone who isn't going to drink, but at the same time, like, it's just kind of, it's gross to me now, like, because we're almost like trying to escape our current reality, if that makes sense. And I would rather just like, I would love to have someone that is totally present and okay with being present and doesn't feel like they need a substance to tolerate me, you know? Yeah. And that's a big thing when you stop drinking. Like there will be people in your life who you could have only tolerated because you were drinking with them or because you were doing an activity that involved drinking. And once you take that substance out, you'll realize like how those friendships are no longer serving you or how you actually can't stand to be around that person or what they're doing. Yeah. It's life-changing.
And then it's like, it's a huge transformational period of time where you have to confront things that you never were forced to confront before. Yeah. Because that exact thing happens where you're like, oh, the people I spent all my time with, now it's going to look completely different because you don't want to do the same things. You don't have the same values. It's wild. How have you navigated first dates and just doing it all in this lifestyle of no alcohol?
I would say there's kind of like two phases to my dating alcohol free. So the first phase, because I was in relationship with someone when I decided to go alcohol free. So that looked very different. So navigating that breakup, I definitely was eager to reach for something. Thankfully I didn't. But in all of the dates that followed, I tried to like suppress my alcohol freeness. Like I didn't want it to become a conversation point. I would try and avoid like going for drinks. But now I'm in a point, and well, I'm not dating currently, but when I was dating in this like second phase, if you will, I would say that the people that I was attracting also lived alcohol free lifestyles.
Which is cool.
I think that's really interesting to see because I get along so much easier with them. Like I've had a lot more second dates with people that don't drink. And again, like that's not to say it's a non-negotiable. Like I would be interested in someone that drinks alcohol as well, but it just is so much easier with someone whose lifestyle like aligns with mine right now. Yeah. So,
and were you using dating apps?
I did for a little bit, but it just seems like so superficial. Yeah. And I can hold a conversation with a stranger, no problem, whether I'm interested or not. And that, oh my gosh, like you have control over how people treat you. But I would sit there on first dates and be like, this is not going to work, but I'll still sit here for an hour and a half out of like respect for you. And it was so draining. And now I don't do that anymore. So unless like I feel like I have an authentic connection with someone like in person, I'm probably not going to entertain a date with them. So I just find like dating apps don't really align with where I'm at right now.
That makes sense. So. They're forced in a way. And it's also hard. I heard this probably on TikTok that it's funny like I read a research article. Nope, heard it on TikTok. We could like sugarcoat it, but we're not going to. That going on a first date and sitting and having drinks or dinner or whatever or coffee, it's hard because it's like an interview like we're doing right now. But like I saw that those things are more for like friends catching up and who already know so much about each other, but it's better on first dates to be like going for a walk or like doing something where you're moving, so it's like conversation can flow easier. And another really cool thing I saw on Instagram is that alcohol actually can really taint the way you feel about the person and the first impression you get, and your boundaries will, you know, come down, and your guard can go down too, and you won't have as much of a filter to be like, do I actually like this person? Or was it the booze?
Yeah, like think back to your university days. Like how many guys did you kiss that you didn't want to kiss, right? And you look back the next morning, you're like, oh my God, that's what happened last night? Like, oh my God, I can't even imagine having that same experience at 26. Like it makes me sick to my stomach to think about that, right? Yeah. And now like when I go on these dates, like I have a clear mind and I know like right away if there's going to be a second date, right? Because there's no like questioning or waiting to see. Like it's a very different experience.
Yeah. How has this changed your relationship with yourself? Because you got to sit with yourself and be confident and trust who you are.
Yeah, I definitely had to navigate some big emotions, I would say. So my drinking was trauma-led, if you will. So I used it to like turn off the flashbacks and all the negative thoughts and to stop the worrying. And so when I removed alcohol, all of that was still there. And so it took a lot of therapy work, a lot of breath work, a lot of meditation. And I think I am now so much more okay like sitting by myself in silence than I ever was. When I was drinking, I was constantly chasing like this next high and constantly looking for more out of life as opposed to just like sitting back and letting myself be still. And I am religious. Like I will bring the Bible in here if that's okay.
Of course.
But even like in Genesis, they talk about how God worked for 6 days. And then even still, like he had that day to rest and recoup and then went back to work. And I found that when I was drinking, I was just 7 days straight. I was go the entire time. And the only time I ever rested when I was hungover. And now I actually like sit and I rest. And that has just been game changing like for myself and my business. And oh my gosh. I know I keep saying like it changes your life, but truly like when you remove alcohol from your life, you put yourself on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah. And it's exciting and it's scary. I find like it really shifts things, and some people can get really confronted by it too, which I try to remember is not my responsibility, and it doesn't really have anything to do with me.
Yeah, but weird how your relationship with alcohol threatens other people's relationship. Yeah. Like when you say, hey, I have an issue, but people will use like what your relationship was as like a comparison. Yeah. Oh, well, she only drank 2 drinks a night or 3 drinks a night. I only drank 1, so I'm okay. Yeah. Which is not good logic to use at all.
No. If you don't mind me asking, if you're comfortable sharing, how has that changed your relationship with your family?
So my family already doesn't have like a big relationship with alcohol. We have alcoholism in the family. So like my mom maybe has 1 drink and that's like once a year. Okay. My dad will have like a glass of wine every so often with supper, but we're a very like pretty chill family in that regard. Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's changed a whole lot, but there has been more concern over me with alcohol. So when we have friends up that are heavily drinking, I think I get looked at a little bit more, like just to make sure that I'm still on the right path. Yeah. But I wouldn't say it's changed too much more other than that.
Yeah, so. That's good. Yeah. That's wild. Like it's such a personal journey, I find. And it's one that can take a really long time of battling with and trying to understand it. And like, it's kind of like, I never realized I thought about this comparison until now, but sometimes I say with breakups, when someone really close to me is like in a situation right now, and I've been in the same situation before where you kind of know this person isn't right for you that you're dating, but you're not quite ready to end it. You're not quite ready for the breakup to happen. And I feel like that could be similarly compared to alcohol, where you can really struggle with your relationship or question it. Like I spent months hungover, crying to my boyfriend, crying to my mom, being like, I can't keep doing this. I can't make myself feel like this. And sometimes you're just not ready yet to pull the plug, and you have to be patient and have grace with yourself. And sometimes it's a big moment. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just maturity in life. And eventually it's wonderful to see an example of someone that is possible to live this beautiful, full, fulfilling life without alcohol.
And I failed the first time too. And what I try to like remind myself in that is that like you're training for a new skill basically. And just like anything else that you do in your life, like it is totally normal to fail. And so unfortunately I did, but in doing so, like I learned that lesson of, okay, I can't say I'm trying to stop drinking. I need to say I'm not drinking. And like that was something that I took away from that first failed attempt that now like makes me so much stronger in this like second run of being alcohol free. So So
have you found there's been like an identity shift in like who you are when you look back to like however many years ago and you're like, whoa, how I've changed?
I honestly don't even recognize, like, my university days are a blur because I don't think I was like being my authentic self, you know, like was continuously getting further and further away from who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
But again, like the culture of the military, like it's a big drinking environment. And so if I would have repelled, like it wouldn't have worked well for me, right? Like, so it all kind of worked out the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I don't recognize that girl one bit. Anymore.
So wild. Have you struggled with or maybe in the earlier days, the cool girl kind of persona? I think probably all women in some way struggle with this idea that like we're supposed to be cool and chill and we go with the flow and not take up space, and drinking is very much a part of that.
Oh yeah. Like I think there's something to be said about someone who can walk into a bar and like order like a whiskey neat, and like there's a hard edge to that, right? And like being able to have your shoulders back and sip on it without like turning up your nose. Like I hate whiskey, but anyways, I was able to pull that off and I was proud of that.
Yeah.
And I find now like when I'm in business settings, and often like a lot of those meetings will happen over like a drink, let's say.
Yeah.
I find like there's a newfound like sense of pride that comes from being able to say, actually, like, I don't drink. And I love that about myself. Like, I think that it's something that like adds to my personality now as opposed to takes it away. Like what you see is what you get, right? Like there's no me having a shot and like becoming this other person. Like this is who I am consistently.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing.
It's very different.
It makes so many memories pop into my head right now of moments where like I've, dating my boyfriend, when we first met, he was like, oh, like, I haven't seen you drunk. And I was like, what do you mean you haven't seen me drunk? I like threw up in the backyard. And it's because he had this like specific idea of what I would be like as a drunk woman, I guess. And it's kind of just like unraveling that, and then having moments at parties now where we're together and he's like, you're so awesome, and like you're just having a great time. And he's like, I feel like I worry less about you when you're not consuming, because he knows I'm feeling secure in myself and I'm present. And I'm battling with the FOMO of leaving early, because I love a good bedtime. I love a full night's sleep, and you can't ignore that as much when you're not drinking.
We are so opposite.
Okay, tell me.
Because I used to use it as like a coping mechanism to sleep. It's like something that I still struggle with. With my PTSD is sleep.
Okay.
And so alcohol was like an easy, like, okay, if I have one or two drinks, then I can kind of like slip into sleep a little bit easier, because if not, like even last night I was awake until probably like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Wow.
Just my mind like running. And so I haven't found like a perfect solution for that.
Nothing's perfect. Truly. What's perfect? What's a perfect solution?
Yeah. So I have no issue like spending all night out partying or whatever sober. Not that I do that, but I'm a night owl through and through.
Okay, gotcha. So it's really a difference in our circadian rhythms, probably.
Yeah, I'm a true night owl.
Okay, so. That's awesome. That's so funny. Your journey is so inspiring, honestly.
It's different, that's for sure.
It's different. And especially being in your 20s too, and navigating it. And I'm curious also, I want to hear your explanation between labeling it as I'm sober or labeling it as I'm alcohol free.
Yeah, so I like to reserve the sober mentality for the people that have struggled with addiction with alcoholism, because I don't identify as an addict, and I recognize that saying no to a substance when you're addicted to it is significantly harder than someone who just likes to have a drink every now and again. And so out of respect for the people that have battled addiction, I don't like to use that word, because I don't feel like I'm enough to use that word, if that makes sense. So I prefer to say that I live an alcohol-free lifestyle, and it's a decision that I've made like to better myself, and it makes me feel good. And that's just, it's like, I mean, it's a word at the end of the day, but to me it's just like used out of respect in that way. I don't know if
that makes sense. 100% it makes sense, because also, I mean, there's a lot of connotations and different associations that we put towards words, and I completely get that. And there's certain things and people that come to mind when it comes to being sober or alcohol free, and being able to make that choice as well, instead of I don't know. No, I don't know where I was going with that, but it totally makes sense.
Yeah, because you can live an alcohol-free lifestyle without ever having an issue with alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I think that's where I was going with that. Yeah. But it's funny because I'm like, well, what's an issue? You know, like, that's like an issue where you can't function day to day, or because that's an issue, but things can also be an issue if they, you know, interfere with your quality of life.
Well, when I came home from deployment, we do like a big physical mental health screening, everything, right? Because you've been away for so long, you haven't even gone to the dentist type thing.
Oh my God. Okay.
And so I had my mental health screening, and there was a whole like alcoholism checklist, and I went through it and I filled it out honestly, and the doctor then recommended me to go seek like counseling for alcoholism. And I remember coming home that night to my partner at the time and saying like, what? Like, do you think we're alcoholics? Like, we're drinking like maybe a bottle of wine a night with supper. Like, we'll go to our friend's house on the weekend, have a couple of drinks. I was just floored. Like, I had never been called an alcoholic before because drinking like a drink at night, like to me, wasn't alcoholism. But there is no like true textbook definition, I would say. It's not like, oh, once you pass this threshold, you're an alcoholic or vice versa, right? Like, and that's kind of scary about it. It's so murky. Normalized. Like you don't even realize like what's an issue for you might not be an issue for somebody else.
Totally.
So it's hard to determine where you fall on that scale.
Yeah, and it's personal. And I feel like we were saying before, if my relationship or your relationship with alcohol triggers someone else, then that's an alarm bell. Like if someone's listening to this and they're like really starting to question their own relationship with it, then it's like, well, just flag that as like, why? Maybe dig deep, understand how is it improving your quality of life? Is it something you've thought about before and wanting to change it? It's all dependent on each person's journey.
And that book that I gave you will talk about how people that are not struggling with alcoholism will not compare their drinking behavior to other people. And so if you're in a position where you're looking at others and you're comparing yourself, like for instance, I would always make sure I wasn't the drunkest person in the room. Like I would religiously be like, I always entertain. So I would be like pouring shots for everyone else to make sure that I wasn't the drunkest one there. That should have been like the alarm bell should have been sounding long before they did. But again, like it was normalized.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like if you are listening to this and you are having that comparison, that should be like a key indicator. Like maybe you don't need to stop, but you should be like reevaluating your relationship with alcohol and asking yourself like, does it add to my life? Like, is it providing value or is it actually hurting me in the long run?
Yeah, for sure. And I've made an episode about some of my tips on tangible things that I've found have helped me if I'm like, you know, not going to be drinking. And it's like having bubblies with me or kombuchas or whatever, and having reasons or, you know, there's a list of things. But I'm curious for you, some of these things that maybe you've replaced that you usually used to go to a drink for, or different like tangible tips that you have that helped you on your journey.
So the first one that I'll give is actually probably a little bit contradictory. Okay. So I think when people first stop drinking, they want to like get rid of all the alcohol in the house, right? And they make like it a really firm thing. I'm done. It's kind of like when you cut out gluten and all of a sudden you have no bread in the house. Similar to that. So I actually kept all the alcohol that I had. And in fact, I accumulated more because I do love to entertain and I do socialize with people who do not live an alcohol-free lifestyle. So I cater to that as well. But I needed to make a choice. Like I needed to look at a cooler and look at a bubbly and decide for myself like every single day that I was committing to this lifestyle. And so the more that you do that, the less that like your eyes will start to wander to the cooler. And now like at the cottage, we have a big alcohol fridge and I have like one little line of bubblies and the rest of the thing is stocked with alcohol. And like, sure, a year ago, that would have been really challenging to like reach for the bubbly. But now it's so easy because even though you can control like your immediate environment, you can take all the alcohol out of your home, you still have to go to bars, you still have to go to school, you still have to go to work, you have to get through happy hour. So sure, you can say no in your house, but if you don't learn how to say no outside, you're really going to struggle with saying no to alcohol.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. And I totally relate to that of like, this extreme of I'm going to get rid of all of it so I don't have to see it. And it's like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean there aren't all these social things in different environments that are going to trigger it.
Oh yeah. Like I have so much alcohol in my house. Are you kidding?
Wow.
And like now I'm moving. I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. Right. But I also don't have people in my life right now where I live that consume like that much alcohol. You know, they might have like a drink here to like, but it's not. Like I genuinely don't know what to do with all this alcohol now. So like, do I donate it? Do I pour it down the sink? I don't even know what to do with it.
Oh my God.
But it's just been like kicking around from when I was drinking. Yeah. But like think about how alcohol is the only drug that when you stop consuming it, and that's when people start to question your relationship with it. Like, isn't that such a mind twist?
Explain that more.
So with other drugs, like say I was a cocaine user, for instance, you would probably look at me if I were to take a bumper. I've never used it, so I don't really know what the terminology is. But if I were to use cocaine right now, you'd probably think like, oh, like maybe this isn't something that you want to be doing in the middle of the day type of thing, right? Like you would question my relationship with cocaine. Yeah. But if I was sitting here sipping a glass of wine or something, there would be you wouldn't think anything of it until I say, oh, actually, I can't have that glass of wine today. Then you would start to think like, oh, well, why is that? Why can't she have that glass of wine? Yeah. It's the only drug that we have that like negative connotation towards stopping, which is so twisted that we've been raised like that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I saw in an interview too, I think it was Tom Holland said like if someone introduced alcohol today and presented it as like this thing that you put in your body that like will make you sick and is like pretty much poison, people would be like, nope, what? Like what? But because I think historically it's just been so ingrained in our culture, it's just so normalized.
Well, if you think about like cigarettes and how those were introduced and how those were once like promoted, right? Yeah. And now where we are with cigarettes, like I feel like that's kind of the direction that we're heading.
Yes, I agree with this.
Yeah, because like the way that I look at alcohol, I think is similar to how someone who's never smoked before would look at cigarettes. Like, yes, it exists, but I have no desire to use it anymore. Yeah. Because it's kind of like, and I'm sorry if there's a child watching, but it's kind of like Santa Claus. Like once you know the truth about Santa Claus, you can never go back. And that's how I feel about alcohol. Like now that I know how detrimental it is to my body, why would I ever willingly put that into my system, you know?
I love that comparison.
And I think I want to talk about that willingness part though, because if you are going to try and be alcohol free and you order a mocktail out at a bar, you need to confirm with your bartender that there's no alcohol in it. I have heard too many stories of people like losing sobriety because someone had ordered some sort of mocktail or virgin drink and it ends up getting mixed up, and then sure enough they've consumed alcohol. Wow. And it's not like that big of a deal if you're just trying to be like alcohol free, but obviously like if let's say you were having a baby or something like that, right? Yeah. There's a little bit more weight to those decisions, but it is like so important to double check with your bartender. Like there's no alcohol in that, right? Like it's a simple question.
I'm so glad you said that. That's something that my mind wandered to recently, is how easy it would be, especially if it's a busy night at a bar, for those to get mixed up. So I think there's nothing wrong with like reiterating, is this alcohol? And then if they question themselves, they'll be like, let me just go make you a new one. And it's better to be safe than sorry with that stuff.
Yeah. Well, when I was 17, I ordered a snow cone at Kelsey's,
Okay.
And it had alcohol in it. I didn't notice. I had like just gotten my driver's license, my G2, drove there on like lunch. Yeah. And I didn't notice until I got my bill, and it was $6.99 instead of $4.99 or whatever the price difference was. And I questioned it, obviously, because I'm 17 and have no money. And they said, it's an alcoholic drink. Like that's the price of it. And I showed her my ID and I was like, I'm underage. So my mom had to come pick me up from Kelsey's, and it was a whole thing because they served a minor. Like didn't even ask her my ID or anything like that. So like it does happen. Yeah. So I would just like encourage you, like if you are going to try and order like a non-alcoholic beverage, like just confirm. It takes an extra second. Yeah. It's a little bit embarrassing, but it is so worth it to ensure like you're staying true to yourself. Because as soon as you have one and you create, like you let it sneak in there, it gets so much harder to stop it.
For sure. And when I pay attention to the inner dialogue of my brain, especially at the start of a social hangout, because you haven't like gotten your juices flowing, gotten into the vibe of the hangout yet, and everyone's starting to have a drink, and that's what you know is getting everyone into the mood or whatever. I have an inner dialogue in my brain, and I challenged it and didn't drink recently when I noticed it, was like, you're 22, come on, like you can have fun, it'll be fine tomorrow's problem, like this is the time to be young and fun. And like it was interesting.
It's hard.
It's super hard.
It's hard. And like that's also something that happens up here, right? So like your friends and your family don't see that you're sitting there on the couch like actively trying to decide not to drink. Like you're trying to do something that is good for you. And then if someone comes over and says like, oh, are you still not drinking? Like how detrimental is that comment? And I know like they don't mean a whole lot by it, but that friggin' hurts when you're sitting there trying to decide, instead of like, hey, how is it going? Like, do you need extra support? Like, do you need a hug even? Right? Like, I think surrounding yourself with people that are also able to like encourage you and help you navigate those tough decisions will make it so much easier. Cause you're right. Like that internal dialogue does happen.
Yeah. And you're so right that I also don't think about how nobody knows that's what's going on in your head, and no one knows by how quickly it could switch too. And then for me, I would go through the same cycle again tomorrow morning. I hate myself for it. I'm like, berating myself for it. I'm like, you tried and you failed and blah, blah, blah. And so it makes such a difference when people do support you and don't question you. And I find myself in the phase where it's like, I'm making excuses. Oh, I drove, so I can't drink, or oh, this or that. You don't have to share if you don't want to about this, but in terms of other substances like weed, or I don't think there's any other one that feels like it's on a similar playing field, or cocaine. Just kidding.
Well, okay. So on cocaine, though, there's a study in that book from 2010. So I know it's like a little bit outdated.
Yeah.
But it compares 20 illegal and illegal substances about how it affects the user and it affects the people around them. And alcohol was the highest with a score of 76.
Whoa.
And cocaine came in like near the bottom, just ahead of cigarettes at like 26.
What?
Nuts, which is weird because like we know that like there's no moderate use of cocaine, right? Like there's no like casual, maybe there is, but like I don't think there's like an appropriate casual user of cocaine, right? But with alcohol, oh my God, does that slide? Oh my goodness, that scale just slides. It's nuts how we look at cocaine as like, here it's like cut and dry, right and wrong. With alcohol though, that scale just continues to slide.
It's true.
But I think with weed, so when I was like navigating PTSD and not being able to sleep, I was prescribed synthetic THC. I absolutely hated it. It was not for me, not the right substance. I did dabble a little bit into edibles and try to get relief that way, and they work. And I love that that's like a great solution for me. But now I'm about to move down to Texas, which is super exciting. Yeah. But cannabis isn't legal down there.
Right.
And so I now need to try and like reevaluate my sleep habits and how can I fall asleep before 4 a.m. without needing a substance to do so. So that's not an answer that I have yet. But I don't know. I don't want to say that like just because you eliminate alcohol means you need to eliminate everything else from your lifestyle. But I would be very careful with how you introduce cannabis into your life. Like I, for the longest time, would never have used it socially. I was using it purely for sleeping. And I've noticed in the last couple of months, it's kind of seeped a little bit more into my social life, which I don't like. And that's something that I want to pull back again. Like I want to get back into social settings where I'm not under the influence of anything. Yeah. And even though I'm only doing that with like close personal friends, and it's normally towards the end of the night when I'm going to bed and we've had like a long chat or something like that, I still want to stick to like cannabis only being for myself for the purposes of going to sleep, because I don't want to have a life that I need to escape from, and I don't want it to feel like I'm doing that with cannabis.
That makes sense. That makes so much sense. I love that you worded it as like you don't want to have a life that you're trying to escape from. Wild. Like what a mental shift that you would make with that sentence, which we don't look like when you look at alcohol and it's seen as, oh, you're just having fun, you're going out, whatever. But it is like, what are you escaping from? And then also, what are you having to confront the next day that's that much harder to confront? Because for me, my anxiety and stuff, I'm noticing like I still have anxiety and I still wake up anxious often. But, and that's also normal physiologically. We have a spike in cortisol, so it gets us out of bed. Yeah. And I was going to say earlier when we were talking about cocaine, it just made me think of this, that check my facts on this, because I think I just heard it through a friend, that having a cold shower in the morning can give you the same release of hormones or chemicals that cocaine gives you.
Okay,
just
interesting.
Obviously in a natural way, but it gives you this like adrenaline rush. And obviously it's not the most enjoyable adrenaline rush, but it's wild. I've been cold showering every morning for the past, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and it really calms my anxiety as well, because it kind of does like a woo. Yeah. Okay, it wakes you up.
There we go.
And but then I think I say this also to just put out there that there's so many natural ways of getting dopamine hits and adrenaline rushes that don't have to do with substances. Substances are just so normalized to be the easiest reach for these alternate states of reality, or these altered states of being. And like you said, you do breath work, and I did breath work this morning and I was like, oh my God, I'm in a better mood.
Yeah. We even look at how we reach for coffee first thing in the morning. Yep. And like this morning I made a coffee. I probably haven't made a coffee in a very long time. Like it's not a substance that I really like to use. I find it spikes my anxiety. It does more negative stuff than it does anything else. But it's like a comfort thing. Like I got a coffee on the drive. So I made a coffee at home and I bought a coffee on the road. I maybe had 2 sips of it. It's sitting in my car, but it's like that comfort. It's like, it's still a crutch for me. So even though, yes, I've removed alcohol, like I still have a lot of work to do to actually like be okay existing just like by myself with nothing else to depend on, right? Like I like having things in my hand to use as like props, or
for sure
when I'm filming content, like I would rather not be the center of it. I would rather like have it on other things. Like I still have a lot of work to do to like get away from having things like impacting my life.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's a journey of discovery and you know, working on ourselves, and it's a process. And I never started drinking coffee, and I'm so glad I never started. And weirdly my boyfriend never started either. So we're like, let's not start.
But that's like a bragging right. Like in university, I hated coffee. I would never drink it.
Yeah.
And I like so desperately want to be that person that can order a black coffee. And I dated someone who drank black coffee, and I tried and tried and tried. I hated it. I don't know why I tried so hard to like something that just was never clicking. But I don't know what it is about society where we just feel like so much pressure to fit in sometimes that we put ourselves in situations where we shouldn't even be in the room, right?
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing I actually have taken away personally from this conversation is I don't need to hide the fact that I'm not drinking alcohol. That's how I felt really the past while, is that when I'm not drinking, I'm trying to be quiet about it. And that comes back to this feeling of wanting to fit in. And also I think being a woman and feeling like I need to make myself small, when like I can be confident in my choices of what I consume and what I don't, and how it affects people can just be their own thing. And it can be a bragging right of like, no, I don't need to have alcohol to have fun. Yeah.
I was scared at first because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to stick to it. But now that I'm like a year and a half into it, I'm like, absolutely. Like, I've done a year and a half alcohol free.
Yeah.
And that is something that like I like to talk about now.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I love that. I just want to close off with some advice you would share with either your younger self during this journey, or you would want to give to someone who's in the boat of questioning their relationship and wanting to move towards an alcohol-free life.
Oh, I was not prepared for this.
That's okay. Whatever comes to the heart.
I would say that it's okay to feel that you're being pulled in a different direction than the rest of your peers.
That's so good.
Because when I started to question myself, I was surrounded by people who loved alcohol.
Yeah.
And that was okay. But now that I am alcohol free and surrounded by people who live a very different lifestyle than my previous group of friends, it feels right to be alcohol free, and I'm aligned with other people. So even though it doesn't feel right for where you are right now, that doesn't mean it can't feel right for you in the future. It just takes work to get there.
Yeah. That was like healing for me. That was like relieving for me. Like I needed to hear that. Like that was like so validating, and like knowing that it can and will transform friendships and relationships, and that's okay, and it will evolve as it will.
Yeah, you're closing a chapter of your life, right?
Totally. I feel that way. An insane amount.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm
me.
so glad. Thank you for bringing the book. I can't wait to read this book. I'll give you an update on my life while I'm reading it and after, because I feel like it will be very transformative.
You'll read it in one night probably.
Okay. So. Amazing. I'm starting it today.
Careful. It's like 400 pages.
Okay. I'll choose wisely. I would love for you to just let people know where they can find you. I know you're vlogging as well, so please tell everybody about your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I just started a vlog. So my handle is the same across Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So it is Madison Cross with 2 A's.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming and sharing. I know it's a vulnerable kind of topic to share. I feel like, but I also like just love how honest you are and how much you've evolved over this past year and a half. Congratulations on a year and a half.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Okay. Tune in to humantohumanpod on Instagram and TikTok. Subscribe, and new episodes come most Mondays.
I love that. Most Mondays.
Today's like the first Monday I like haven't posted, but it takes a while to edit guest episodes.
Oh yeah, of course.